Hello, Rustin.
Hello, we better now?
We're much better now, thank you. I have a beer in front of me with a lump of lime in it. It's the end of the day. I'm not working today, so...
That's a good thing. It's a beautiful March evening, and so...
Where are you located?
I had to hide away from the insanity of the city, so I moved to Boise, Idaho.
Beautiful country out there.
It is. It really is. The only drawback to living here is the fact that so few bands come through here. It's killing me. But other than that, it's gorgeous.
Oh, by the way, let me clear up something. We're not going to retire.
Okay. Just going to go out, drums a-blazing.
In the immortal words of Lonesome Dave, we're going to roll till we're old, and we're going to rock till we drop. And that's a fact, Jack.
Perfect.
Let me ask you a question. Do you have the new album, Last Train Home?
Yes, and there better be another album on the way. But yes, I do. I want to talk about that.
Well, actually, this year, Linda, our manager, my wife, is working on getting a DVD out. Now, we've got like DVDs from the last, 12 years. So I tried going through them earlier, over the winter and late last year. But that's what we're working on this year. There's always songs that that we're writing, and in fact the band works real well together as far as that goes. It's a lot of fun. In fact, I'm at the band house at the moment down in DeLand, Florida.
Well, and I want to talk about the most recent album and what's coming up, the future of Foghat. But before we journey to the present and beyond, I'd like to take a look at the long road which sort of brought us here, if that's okay with you.
Okay, that's fine by me.
Now, you and Lonesome Dave first connected in Savoy Brown in the late 60s. What led you...
That's 1967.
Yeah, what led you guys to leave to form Foghat?
We've been in the band for about 3 years. I think we did 5 or 6 albums. We were basically just, hired guns. We were getting $60 a week, wife and kids to keep. And... a new record deal was up, but we were getting between like $10,000 and $15,000 a night. But well, I wasn't. But it just seemed sort of time to sort of maybe go out on our own. Actually, what happened was Kim fired Tony Stevens, the bass player, and he told myself and Lonesome Dave we had to shape up and learn to play properly. That's sort of basically it. It was Kim's band, and still is. And we said, well, all right, well, we'll see the end of the tour or whatever you want to do. But we went back to my room and started playing some songs. And in fact, the first song we wrote that night was Paul's Hall of Fame. And then we said to Kim, or actually to Kim's brother, Harry Simmons, the next day, that we'd leave, but, we'll stay as long as you want us to stay. And then he said, this is Harry Simmons, well, you'll never work again. And we said, why is that? He said, well, he managed Savoy Brown and Chicken Shack in England, then, true to his word, he stopped us from working in England and in Europe. He went to jail for a while. And I'm still good friends with Kim. We talk 2 or 3 times a year. I did some session work with him about 7, 8, 9 years ago. And I keep in touch with him, and in fact, a number of years back, he came up and jammed with us in Southern California and played 3 or 4 songs with us. In fact, Kim, I think, is probably playing better than he ever did. He just seems to find it difficult to keep a band together. I guess that can be, it is difficult to sort of keep a band, a really good band together, getting enough good work and I guess anything else, but I've managed to keep this band together for a while, so and it's fine.
Yeah, just a little while, only 4 decades. So
yeah, right.
No,
it's not easy, but the interesting thing is the current lineup. I mean, Charlie and Brian have been with us. We've been together over 12 years now. So
yeah,
or 12 years. So we're doing good. Everybody gets on great. We hang out together. We go fishing. We play golf together. We love playing together. In fact, I had dinner last night with Brian and his wife and kids. It's sort of like a family thing. We got this band house down here in Florida, which is nice because the winter's are a little slow, so the neighbours don't mind us making noise. In fact, I think they rather enjoy it.
Good old bluesy boogie and rock, so...
Yeah. I mean, we don't shut the doors or anything, and it's in the middle of nowhere, sort of like horse country, and it's like 10 acres, and you can go fishing or whack golf balls around, and the locals are real friendly, so it's a lot of fun, and making the last record here was really enjoyable too.
Now, most Foghat fans know at least the diehard ones, know the name of the band came from a Scrabble game Dave played when he was younger and sort of later turned into his make-believe friend, if you will, Junior Foghat. When he first brought the name Foghat to you guys and suggested as the bad name, what was your thought?
Well, actually, I remember a conversation I had with Dave about that. He actually came up with the word when we were all in Savoy Brown. And Dave, we were probably sitting around drinking and doing other stuff back, it was like back in the 60s. And he decided, and Chris Jordan Dave's name was Lonesome Dave or Lonesome Jack's man, and Kim was the Incredible Gnome. I don't think he liked that very much. And Dave thought that Chris Jordan should be Luther Foghat. I was Skins Willie for some unknown reason. Chris Jordan couldn't sort of see that Luther Foghat was a particularly good idea for him. But actually what happened was we were driving up into London from our base out in the countryside, and we hadn't really decided on a name for the band. So Dave said, what about Foghat? And we all said, that'll do.
A lot of deep thought put into it, huh?
Yeah, a lot of deep thought went into it. Well, actually, we had a lot of different names. Our manager at the time, Tony Ochida, was coming up with lots of names and spreading the word. But Foghat seemed like a good idea. I always thought it was a pretty cool name. It doesn't really mean anything except us. So a lot of people could see some deep meaning in there.
No, but it works for you guys. It's a classic name, and it's synonymous.
It worked for us. Thanks, Dave.
This year, 2012, celebrates 40 years since Foghat's debut album, self-titled album, was released. Dave Edmunds co-produced that, if I remember.
Yeah, well, Dave Edmunds, we had a lot of help on the first record, but without Dave Edmunds' magic hand on it, I don't think it would have turned out anywhere near as well as it did. Dave was absolute genius. He was great to work with. I suppose I could tell you a little bit about the recording thing. We'd already made like 5 or 6 demos ourselves. We recorded them at Abbey Road, and our manager was shopping, the demos. He played it for all the major labels, all the minor labels, and everybody in between. Nobody was really interested, and anyway, he knew Albert Grossman, who was the manager of Bob Dylan, the band, Peter, Paul and Mary, Janis Joplin, amongst others. And anyway, Albert Grossman was coming over to London with the band. They were touring, and Todd Rundgren was with him, and the band had booked some studio time in their studios in London. And we went in there and did a couple of songs with Todd, one of them being... I'll come to me in a minute. Anyway, then we booked a small club in North London in Islington or Highbury, somewhere around there, and for the afternoon, and Albert came down to see us, and we played like 5 or 6 songs. He sat about 20 feet in front of the band, and we cranked up the high whites and Marshalls, and his hair visibly went backwards. and after that, he stood up and he said, "Is there anywhere we can go and get some like tea and biscuits?" And of course, he was American. I don't do a very good American accent. And so he said, I said, "Yeah, there's a hotel across the road." So we went across the road, and Albert ordered tea and biscuits all round. So we sat there, and Albert sort of used to put his fingers together and sort of scrape away at them. And he said, "Well, hey, let's just do it." And every time I say that, I get a chill, because I knew who Albert Grossman was, and I mean, he said, let's do it. That means it's going to get done. And like a couple of weeks later, I think he sent us $10,000. We went up to Rockfield Studios in Wales, and we had the day shift, and Dave Edmonds had the night shift. He would work from like 3, maybe midnight to midday, and then we'd have midday till day came back in. And of course, sessions would overlap a little bit, and we would hang around and listen to his stuff, and he would hang around and listen to some of our stuff. And his stuff sounded really, really good. Our stuff sounded all right, but it didn't have that, a little bit of magic on it, or fairy dust, or whatever you want to call it. So we said, Dave Edmonds, would you like to produce us? And he said, yeah. I'll help you guys out for a small fee. And it was, and that's how basically how it happened. Yeah, Dave Edmonds was terrific. I loved working with him. In fact, he did sort of half of the second album as well. Then he sort of disappeared. Never didn't hear from him for about 10 years.
Wow.
He is and was a brilliant producer and engineer. Great guitar player too.
And you guys chose to do a cover of Willie Dixon's "I Just Want to Make Love to You" on that album, which still is a staple for you guys today.
Yeah, interestingly enough, when we were doing that, everybody thought it was going to be really good, but it wasn't until Dave Edmonds got his grubby little fingers on mixing it and recording it that it actually turned out as good as it did. I really have to give Dave Edmonds a great deal of credit for how good the album sounded and how well it turned out. I sound like a Dave Edmonds fan, don't I? Well, I am. The band really enjoys, playing and making music. It's sort of very symbiotic between us and our fans and the audience. It was, it was never about, the money or the fame and success and the women and the drugs. It was about music. Mind you, there was all that other stuff as well, especially back in the 70s. But it was always about the music with us. That was one of the things I always loved about Lonesome Dave. He never gave it anything less than like 110% when he performed. And even when he was sick, he would still give it everything. And I loved playing with Dave. He was great.
Always had that smile on his face.
Yeah. But off stage, Dave was a very quiet and private person. He wasn't like the rest of us, but he was known to have a bit of fun from time to time.
Now, the band's next album was also self-titled, oddly enough, but it's sort of become known as Rock and Roll because of the cover depiction. Whose idea was that?
Our manager at the time, Tony Otita, was a big fan of Robert Downey, not Robert Downey Jr., this is his dad,
right,
who was a filmmaker, made a number of, how can you describe them, avant-garde film, I suppose, would cover it, Grease's Palace and Pound, very interesting movies. Anyway, he was a big fan of his. Anyway, he sent our first album to Robert, and he said, "Do you have any ideas for an album cover?" Robert Downey sent back a black and white picture of a rock and a roll. Of course, Warner Brothers looked at that and they said, "You can't put a black and white picture of a rock and roll on the cover of an album." I thought it looked great, to be honest with you. It was really cool. Warner Brothers said, "No, it has to be in colour and it has to look really nice." So Jimmy Otita, who was our stage manager at the time, Tony's brother, and I'm still good friends with him, went out into New York at the time, went into Central Park with a hammer and chisel and started chopping up rocks. Also, one of New York's finest comes along and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" Jimmy sort of explained that he was trying to find a rock for a picture of a rock band's album cover. So the policeman, New York's finest, said, "Get down off of there," and then pointed him in the direction of a rock shop in New York. So there we got a rock from a rock shop, and I think there we got the bun, which is probably a Kaiser roll from a deli, and that's that.
And there you have it. So Now, 75 is when Foghat really broke through. You guys adopted the logo from your Energized album as your permanent calling card. Dave penned two of the band's most legendary songs, Slow Ride and Fool for the City, which are both still anthems. What did you think when he brought those tracks to the band?
Well, what happened was Nick Jameson had joined the band. He'd been our long-time producer and co-producer, and we'd worked together. Nick and I, in fact, become real good friends. I was living up in Woodstock and Bearsville at the time, as was Nick, because Nick was the resident engineer at Bearsville Records.
Right.
And we were looking for a bass player. Craig McGregor had already auditioned, but it wasn't quite working anyway. I was upstate, and Nick and I would go out and jam in the evenings and play tennis or badminton together. And I said, "Yeah, Nick, can you play bass?" And he said, "Yeah, that was the first instrument I learned." Well, actually, it was piano, I think, was the first instrument he learned. I said, "Do you want to join the band?" And he said, "Yeah." So he joined the band, came down to Long Island, and Rod and I had a house down there, and we converted the basement into like a rehearsal room, played all this stuff that was supposed to make it not noisy. Right. It still was though. And Slow Ride actually came out of a jam. The whole arrangement, Nick arranged everything. Rod started playing in the beginning, and Nick arranged all the middle parts, the funk part, and the middle eight, and all that stuff. That was all Nick's.
Oh wow!
I wrote the beginning, by the way.
Really?
Bang.
But they give Lonesome
Bang.
Dave credit for everything,
Bang.
huh?
No. He only gets credit for the words.
Oh, is that?
And then we got the song done, and Dave said, I've got some words I think will fit to that. In fact, there was a Savoy Brown song that was called Take It Easy, but that's neither here nor there. So we were up, then Nick and I went on the road to find a studio where we came off the road, but the band wasn't touring. And we told our management that we wanted to take 3 or 4 months off to record, which we hadn't done since the first album. All the albums were done like kind of piecemeal, like 2 or 3 weeks at a time, and in various different studios. Right. We really didn't have any time to sort of sit down and really give it our best shot. And Nick is a really, really talented fellow. He's a great engineer. He can play every instrument under the sun. Don't you hate people like that?
And now he's an actor, so go figure.
Now he's an actor as well, yeah, and a comedian. So anyway, Nick and I rented a station wagon. We put some drums and guitars and amps in the back, and off we went. We went to a couple of different places. Nick found this place up in Sharon, Vermont, on the top of a mountain. We went there, huge, great big wooden room, really nice sounding room, and they had some really decent equipment there. I banged around on some drums, and Nick would come down and play piano with the drums and bass with the drums and guitars and stuff. And then, who was the engineer? What was her name? Jerice and John, I think. Jerice, I remember Jerice. Anyway, she would press the buttons and record it, then Nick would run back up the stairs and have a listen, and then run back down. And we'd play different things and try different stuff, and then after about a couple of days up there, Nick and I said, it sounds really good. So we drove back down to Woodstock, called everybody up, and booked time at the studio. And we spent about 6 weeks there to start off with. Then the power would go out occasionally. It was sitting on top of a mountain, like strange things would happen. Moose would run into the pole or something, or a bear would climb up a pole. And from time to time, the power would go out. In fact, it went out halfway through Slow Ride, the actual recording of Slow Ride. The power went out, and then we came back about 2 weeks later, and the power came on, and Nick said, just play along to the song. So it was there's sort of like a drum, there's a break with drums, and then you do the drums and bass solo.
Right.
And so it was done in 2 parts, actually. I don't know if we should be telling people this, but it's true. And then So Ride was born. The album was done. Nick and I stayed up there. Nick mixed a couple of songs. Nick he mixed Flow Ride and Save Your Lovin' off of that album, and then we drove back down to Bearsville, played it for Paul Fishkin, who was the in charge of Bearsville Records at the time. And he said, "You can't have an 8-minute song as a single." And we said, "Fuck off, yes we can." He said, "No, you can't." And he said, in fact, up until this point, Foghat the band had never guided singles. We just went into the studio, made records, and let the record company do that. This is the only time that we actually had some real input into it. So he said, "Well, we'll cut it down to 3.5 minutes." And we said, "No, fuck off, you're not going to cut it down at all." So he didn't. But what happened was you know how radio stations are.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so they edited it down anyway. But some brave souls played the full 7 minutes and 59 seconds. And there we go. Yeah, I still enjoy playing that tune. It's a lot of fun.
For me, one of the greatest rock riffs is the one that Rod and Dave penned for Driving Wheel. Talk a little bit about the Night Shift album.
That was Rod came up with that riff, the intro. That was all Rod. Rod was a fantastic guitar player, especially throughout the early days of the band and through about sort of 77, and then he started to get a little tired. But Rod had a huge hand on this band, and he was a fabulous guitar player. Loved working with him.
Now, oddly enough, I think Nick was still in the band for the Night Shift album, right? But you had Dan Hartman produce?
No, actually, Nick was still playing with us.
Right.
And Craig, but he wanted to go out, and Nick wanted to do his own album.
Gotcha.
So we said, all right. So then we called up Craig McGregor, who we'd already auditioned, but I guess he came in second, and said, "Are you interested?" And we brought him on the road with us for a while. Nick taught him a whole bunch of parts that we were playing, and, we wanted to make sure that Craig could handle being on the road.
Right.
No problem. In fact, a couple of weeks back, maybe a month or so back, he was telling me a story about we played the Spectrum in Philadelphia, and he said with Nick was still in the band, and he said he's sitting on the side of the stage with Leslie West and Stevie Marriott, and he's saying to himself, "How cool is this? I'll play in this band." And Craig McGregor is with us to this day. From time to time, he's had to leave for various reasons, but he's our bass player. So, and he's also my co-captain, whether he likes it or not.
Now, if one were to make a list of the best live rock albums of all time, Foghat Live would certainly be in the top 5. I think I went through 3 or 4 copies on vinyl myself.
Thank you.
It was only 6 tracks, but it made an impact. Now, you guys released it after the Night Shift album, but it contained no songs from that album. I assume it was recorded prior, but why only 6 songs, and were you surprised by the overwhelming response to the record?
Actually, I wasn't surprised. I would regularly, our sound engineer at the time, his name's Bob Coffey, we're still good friends, would record on cassettes back. And I would regularly get cassettes after each show, and I'd sit down and listen to them back in the hotel, and to make sure we're all on the same page. Back in the 70s, you could get a little bit excitable, and like sometimes things, some of the songs could get a little out of hand, especially like Honey Hush and stuff like that. And in fact, it was my suggestion to do a live album, and Rod and Dave were up for it, as was Craig, and Nick Jameson came on board to produce it and engineer it. We did a number of shows over the years. We did a show back in 1972-74 down in the Warehouse in New Orleans, and with a horn section, which was rather interesting. Alan Toussaint did all the arrangements for us. But once again, I think everybody was playing a bit too quick. Blame the drummer. Actually, the drummer always has to get blamed, doesn't he? Really? I've got broad shoulders, I can handle it. But what actually happened, it was supposed to be a double album. And the shows we actually recorded were from, let me get this right, Syracuse and Rochester, New York. And it was supposed to be a double album. And back then our show was about an hour and a half or hour and 40 minutes, something like that. And I'm sure there were songs from Night Shift and or other things, but Warner Brothers didn't think it was a good idea to have a double live album. It just goes to show they don't know what they're fucking talking about, right? that was like, I mean, I don't know how many millions it sold.
Yeah, tell that to Peter Frampton, right?
Right. That's why it was a double cover, and it opened up. Originally, it was supposed to be a double album cover, but they said no, and make it a single. I'm not sure why, but you know what? It's okay. That was then, and this is now.
So, do you guys still have all those recordings somewhere from then? I mean, have you ever considered re-releasing the original live with all the extra tracks?
You know what? I doubt it. The reason I say that is that back then, I think, well, unfortunately, Albert Grossman died a number of years back, and the people running Bearsville Records, let me try and be kind here. Well, they're not Albert. Let's put it that way. Albert would have made sure that he kept everything. But no, I don't think they're around. If they do surface, then I'd get hold of Nick, and we'd certainly do something about it. Occasionally, something turns up, but no, I don't know what happened to them.
Well, that's too bad.
I wasn't in charge back then, so.
This is Rustin Rose, a.k.a. Quasimojo, here on Mojo Radio, talking to Roger Earl, the Duke of Earl from Foghat. We're going to hang on to him for a few minutes longer. We're going to play some Driving Wheel right now, and we're going to come back on the other side, and we're going to talk about my favorite Foghat album. We'll be right back with you. Hey, everybody, Rustin Rose, a.k.a. Quasimojo, back with you. Of course, still with us. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Roger Earl of Foghat.
That's all right. Hey, I've got my grill's out the back, but I turned it down, so I didn't put the chicken on, so
okay.
It's all right.
Hopefully there's still propane left when we're done.
Well, I've got another tank somewhere.
There you go. So I want to talk about my favorite Foghat album here in just a second, but before that, you guys did a very special show. I think it was at the Palladium. It was in '77.
Yeah.
A very special blues show. Tell us a little bit about that show.
All right. It was during... we were doing the Stone Blue album rehearsals and writing songs and stuff, and I think Rod and Dave sort of came up against sort of a brick wall, and we writing that is, but so we started playing some blues stuff, which we all grew up playing, like Sweet Home Chicago, Hurts Me Too, and that sort of one thing led to another, and in fact I think it was our publicist, because myself and Dave and Rod especially were huge blues fans. I mean, that's how we sort of got into sort of our love of music. And our publicist said, well, why don't you do a blues show? I mean, we had more money than cents at the time. Hold on a second. I had a dime. My wife says I'd had more money than cents. And of course, Dave jumped up and down at the idea. And so we started asking around who wanted to sort of do a tribute to the blues. It was to raise money for the New York Public Library, which really didn't have a very comprehensive blues collection, and it seemed like a good idea. Up until that point, music had been extraordinarily good to us, and it was also a way of giving something back, and also a chance to hang out and play with some of our musical heroes.
Right.
Muddy Waters was on board. John Lee Hooker was on board. Paul Butterfield, who I knew anyway from up in Woodstock and jammed with him a number of times. Johnny Winter, Eddie Bluesman Kirkland, who was fantastic. Honey Boy Edwards. Who else? Otis Blackwell, who wrote all the early songs for Elvis Presley on the Sun label. Who am I missing out? Pine Top Perkins on piano. It was really Big Eye Smith on drums and harp, Muddy, and it turned into this sort of 5-6 hour jam. Now, it was a highlight, but then we got. It was a fantastic evening, probably a highlight of my musical career, to be honest with you. But just recently, our old front of house sound engineer found all the cassettes that he'd recorded and mixed. So we may be able to get that out. The film, I have no idea who got hold of that, but we might be able to put out some recordings of that, and they're really good. I've listened to a bunch of them on CDs, so that might be interesting.
That would be an absolutely wonderful thing. And then, of course, as you said, that was during the Stone Blue era there when you guys were doing the recording. And Stone Blue is probably my favorite album from the band, not counting Foghat Live, of course. Very steeped in the blues, as you said. Not a weak track on the record. What do you recall about making that record?
Well, interestingly enough, I recently just had the whole catalogue is being re-released on a new label in England or in Europe. Just in England. Edsel Records. Edsel Records doesn't sound like an English record company, does it? Anyway, so they called me up as I'm supposed to have memory of all this, and so I would I re-listened to all the albums again because I hadn't really listened to them in a long time, and I particularly liked Stone Blue. There was a lot of really cool stuff on there. It was work making that record, but not because of the band. We were having issues with the so-called producer. We were used to working with producers who knew what they were doing. But anyway, that's another story. But I really enjoyed it. There is a lot of good stuff on there. I love playing Stone Blue. We play it every day still, and there's a lot of good stuff on there. Absolutely,
and it sort of comes full circle when we get to the new album, but we'll get to that in a minute. After that album, that was sort of a melancholy period for me because disco and new wave began to saturate radio and push bands like Foghat out the door. I know you guys released a string of albums with the band's sound, trying to adapt a bit, if you will, to that new environment. Wide Boy is still one of my favorite tunes to this day.
Yeah, I don't know that it was a conscious effort on our part to adapt. But we had, Rod, by this time, was starting to have some problems, and whereas prior to that, Dave and Rob were like the real writing partnership. Rob was like the heart and soul of the band as far as his, guitar playing and what he brought to the band. He was a fantastic slide player and guitar player, and he was a terrific foil, I guess, for Dave. But without Rod, it became. It was a different band, and for a while there. No, I think we still made a couple of good records. As I said, I had to listen to the whole catalogue, and I was sort of mildly impressed with our efforts. But where were we? I think I got lost.
No, and that's sort of the thing that happened. The same thing happened a decade or so later when grunge came in and tried to kill off rock and roll all over again, but. Now, you guys...
Well, I know, grunge is rock and roll anyway, isn't it?
I don't know. I couldn't get into a lot of that stuff. I mean, it is, but I just like good classic rock and roll. That's me. But now, you guys took time apart for a while there until Rick Rubin sort of convinced you to reunite and record Return of the Boogeyman.
Yeah, I wasn't in on that. Apparently, Dave and I were arm wrestling. Well, David left the band and moved back to England for, 1984, I think he moved back to England, then came back in 1991, somewhere around there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I carried on playing. And we had two bands for a couple of years, once you get, some rather dodgy lawyers and booking agents in the middle of it. Dave and I are always good friends. We've always got on real well anyway. So we decided to bury the hatchet, not in each other's head. And we put the band back together, and I think it improved immensely after that.
What are your recollections of recording that album with you guys back together again? Because you guys you re-recorded it. I Just Want to Make Love to You Again, and jump that.
That
train.
wasn't my idea. Just want to get that straight. Yeah, that there was. I went back to England. There was an illness in the family, and I was there. And Dave sent me some cassette, and I was listening to the songs that he was writing, and there was some good stuff on there. And that was for about 9 months, and then I came back, and we got together in LA, I believe, and started rehearsing and writing. Tony Stevens had joined the band again on bass, so he had to learn a lot of stuff. But Tony was a very good bass player. Rick Rubin originally wanted to get the original band together. I'm not sure what happened and why Rick Rubin didn't sort of produce that album. I have a feeling management got in the way. I think Rick was busy with another act or had, another thing on, and I don't think management could wait. I would have waited to work with Rick Rubin. The man's obviously brilliant, has a great head for rock and roll. Just if you listen to any of the bands that he's recorded, he does really good work, and I would have liked that. And as would Dave, but at the time, time moves on, and you have to do what you have to do. So we grabbed Nick Jameson again, and he came in, and I thought Nick did a terrific job producing that album. And there's a lot of good. Again, I had to listen to that album as well, which I haven't listened to for a long time, and there's some really cool tracks on there. One of my favourites is Jump That Train.
Yeah, that's what I was just saying. That was a really great track. There were some good ones on there. So
yeah, could you play? Can you play that?
Can I play? Absolutely, I can play that.
Oh, it's Jump That Train. It's a great rock and roll blues tune. Dave wrote this one.
At Roger Earl's request, we're going to play Jump That Train from Return of the Boogeymen, and we'll be back on Mojo Radio with Roger Earl here to wrap it up in a few minutes. Oh, and there it is, Jump That Train from Return of the Boogeyman at Roger's request. Still holding on to him here. I know his chicken is urging to get on that grill, but we're going to keep him for a few minutes longer. Now, you guys said that you wanted to record a blues album going all the way back to the 70s, but really, isn't every Foghat record a blues album?
Yeah, Dave once said, Foghat's a blues band, we just turned it up to 10. In fact, when we were doing the Fall for the City album, Dave was sitting there playing me the chords to get the arrangement down. Me, Dave, and Nick were sitting there going over for Fall for the City. Mm-hmm. And Dave was sort of looking at me, and I said, "Hey, Dave, how many chords are in there?" We had this ongoing thing. He said, "It's all right, Rog. There's only 3." He said, "But the other ones, they're just passing chords. They don't matter." Because, as my older brother Colin once said, anything other than 3 chords has to be viewed with a certain amount of suspicion. They rock and roll, but we like it.
So, sort of coming full circle from Stone Blue, in 2010, you guys released the latest studio album, Last Train Home, the bluesiest album yet, obviously. Did the melancholy of recording this without Dave and Rod sort of resonate during the recording for you?
It wasn't really melancholy. It was kind of a joyous occasion. I think had Dave been around, I think he may have picked a few more obscure songs, because Dave had a fantastic record collection, and in fact, whenever we did anybody else's songs, it was Dave who came up with the tunes ideas first. I think there might have been others on there, but it was certainly a tribute to Dave, and certainly that's how it was meant anyway. And of course, we asked Eddie Kirkland to come and play on the record with us.
Right.
And Dave was a huge fan of Eddie's, and in fact, Eddie and Dave had become good friends.
Right. I think Eddie must have been, in his mid-80s when you guys recorded that album?
87.
Wow.
Yeah. We could just about keep up with him. Eddie was a fantastic guitar player and singer and writer. Actually, he was a poet. He wrote some great stuff, and he was a beautiful man. He really was. He was something special.
And you guys had 3 new Foghat originals on there, if I remember correctly. Some real classic blues material. And you redid It Hurts Me Too and Feels So Bad from previous Foghat albums.
Right.
Talk a little bit about that album, making it.
We started it about a year beforehand. What we would do, it was just the beginning of an idea. And so we went into a studio on Long Island, did about 6 songs there. And we really liked the way they turned out. It was actually supposed to be just demos. And then we came back after touring. In the winter, we came back down here to Florida. And we set up in the living room, and we set a studio up. And Brian Bassett, who is the resident genius here, we started recording and playing, and we finished it and mixed it down here. It was a lot of fun. It was a very joyous thing. Playing blues and rock and roll is, it's not like hard work. I mean, it's you have to think about what you're doing, but it's like it was a joyous thing, and yeah, it's kind of a celebration.
Well, and you guys sort of brought it full circle again too, because you re-recorded a classic Savoy Brown track.
Yeah, that was Charlie's idea. We'll blame Charlie for that. Charlie was a big Savoy Brown fan and a huge fan of Chris Jordan, Savoy Brown's original singer. And we had two songs. It was Needle and Spoon and what was the other one we were going to do? I can't remember now. There was a couple of songs. So Needle and Spoon seemed to work, so we did that.
Well, you always thought the drums were too low on the original anyway.
Well, they turned them off. and it wasn't because I wasn't playing very well. In fact, if I recall rightly, I was actually playing well, but that's what happens when the guitar player is mixing the album. But actually, the original is really, really cool. I love Chris Jordan's voice. He was a great singer. I think he was one of the best English blues singers to sort of come out of the 70s, 60s and 70s, I should say.
And I'm just old enough to know all that stuff, too, which is really sad. So
yeah.
You recorded, as we've already said, Eddie Kirkland appeared on a couple of the album's tracks, did a brilliant job. I mean, played his heart out. After you finished recording the album, unfortunately, I believe Eddie was killed in an auto accident. That's got to be a little bittersweet.
That's right. Yeah, down here in Florida. Eddie was touring constantly all over the States and in Europe as well. He was a real blues man. He came from, that last generation of great bluesmen as far as I'm concerned. And, unfortunately, he was killed in a car accident. I don't think he suffered too much. I went to his funeral in Macon, Georgia, and it was the first time that I'd actually been to a Baptist funeral, and the band was rocking. And everybody was singing. It was like this joyous occasion. And I went, wow, this is a way to celebrate somebody's life. And everybody was singing. We were all crying, and like people were telling stories about Eddie. There was a lot of tales to tell as well. But it was really special. I was very glad and proud to have been there and to have known the man as well.
And it's you sort of said about Last Train Home, it was not so melancholy as it was joyous, and it was a celebration of Dave and Rod, and in a sense, it was a joyous celebration of and the last train home, if you will, for Eddie. So,
that's kind of an irony, isn't it?
Yeah.
It wasn't planned. We did about 6 or 7 songs with Eddie, and Brian Bassett and I had talked about we wanted to do a whole album with Eddie and like really try and do him justice, because we often felt, I felt that he was underrated as an American like blues writer, singer, and guitar player. But I guess we better leave it at that.
Well, that was my next question: was do you think you guys will ever release those extra tracks you recorded with him?
I don't know if it's sort of finished, and like what would happen is Eddie would start playing and everybody would join in. It wasn't like, how can I put this, structured.
Right. Just a free-for-all jam, right?
And Eddie would, play harp and put his guitar down during the recording. And Lefty Lefkowitz, our harp player on the album, like, he would nod to Lefty to sort of start playing, and Lefty would go, oh, now. It was, the songs were pretty long. They were like 7, 8, 9 minute tunes, so there was a lot of jamming on there, so there might be some editing in there, but we'll see.
Well, I got a couple more questions for you before we get out of here. You can get to your barbecue and grab another beer.
Okay.
The same year you released Last Train Home, you guys also released Not Live at the BBC. What's the story there?
We did a live radio show in New York, actually out of the studio where we recorded half of Last Train Home, and it turned out really well. And there were some songs on there that hadn't been released before, or not with that lineup, or the arrangements different. there was a record company in England that was interested in it, and I think we were sitting around drinking some tequila one evening and said, let's call it Not Live at the BBC, because everybody has a Live at the BBC album out. So that's all there is to that one. But I enjoyed making the record. That was a lot of fun. That was from a live radio show.
Nice. You've been doing this for well over 4 decades. You said at the beginning of the interview you're not retiring.
Nah.
What keeps
don't worry about that.
What keeps you on the road, and are there plans for another studio album? I know you're going to be working on the DVD, but we want some new music.
Charlie, we're all writing. I've got a couple of songs. Brian has some stuff, as does Charlie. We probably won't do anything this year. We're probably going to leave it until next winter, and then we'll come down here and start writing and recording. And so probably not this year, the year after. So yeah, but as I said earlier, we're going to roll to the road and rock till we drop. I think the band is still really viable. Everybody plays great. Everybody loves going out on the road and playing. Our fans are fantastic, and we also have a lot of young people coming to see us. So it's I'm one of those fortunate few in this world who gets to earn a living and doing something I really enjoy and love. So why would I want to stop?
Absolutely. And you got a beautiful wife by your side the whole way supporting you. That's great too. So, well, you led us to Dave's famous words there about keeping it going, rocking as long as you can. So last question then before we leave, and this is the song we will play out with. What is your favorite Lonesome Dave song?
Oh, dear. There's just too many. The song, I really, off of the Road Cases album, I thought there were 2 songs on there I particularly liked. There was Angel of Mercy, and there was another one called Don't Want to Tear You Down. But Angel of Mercy I thought was a beautiful song. And but Dave wrote, tons of great songs. Stone Blue is a classic. But I really liked Angel of Mercy if it was a Lonesome Dave song. And I know it meant a lot to Dave.
Well, perfect then. We will roll out of here with Angel of Mercy. Roger Earl of Foghat, thank you so much I kept you an hour almost, a lot longer than I had planned on. But
my pleasure. The chicken's starting to get a little warm.
All right.
I've got to get it on the barbecue now.
Roger Earl of Foghat, we're going to roll on out of here with a double shot, Angel of Mercy and Stone Blue. Keep it rocked and loaded. We'll be back on the other side.